In the heart of Asia lies a land of mountains and deserts, a place where empires have risen and fallen, where poets once sang and warriors marched. Afghanistan, beautiful, resilient, and scarred by history, has always been more than a country. It is a crossroads of civilizations, a bridge between worlds, and a mirror reflecting both the triumphs and tragedies of humanity. To understand Afghanistan is to walk through time itself, ancient, cultural, geographical, and modern, each chapter revealing a nation that refuses to be forgotten. Prehistoric Afghanistan, the dawn of human settlement, long before the first kingdoms rose or trade caravans crossed the mountains. The land now known as Afghanistan was home to some of the earliest human communities in Central Asia. Archaeological evidence places human activity here at least 50,000 years ago, during the Paleolithic period. The caves of Dera Haig in Badakhshan and Karuk in Herat province reveal stone tools, animal remains, and traces of hearth fires, offering glimpses into the lives of prehistoric hunter-gatherers who roamed these valleys. These early humans lived in a harsh yet resource-rich environment, rivers teeming with fish, fertile valleys for seasonal foraging, and mountains abundant in minerals. Around 3000 BCE, as agriculture spread across Eurasia, Afghanistan's first settled farming communities emerged in the Helmand River Basin and Amudarya region. These proto-villages cultivated barley, wheat, and legumes while domesticating sheep and goats. Early irrigation systems were dug to harness seasonal floods, allowing communities to thrive even in semi-arid conditions. One of the most significant developments of this era was Afghanistan's role as a source of lapis lazuli, mined in Badakhshan and traded as far as Egypt and Mesopotamia. This semi-precious blue stone became a coveted luxury for pharaohs and kings, hinting that even in the prehistoric era, Afghanistan's resources connected it to the wider world. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, integration into a superpower by the 6th century BCE, Afghanistan's various regions were drawn into the orbit of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Founded by Cyrus the Great, the territory was not a single unified province, but a mosaic of satrapies, each with its own culture, economy, and military role. These included Bactria in the north, known for its fertile plains and strong cavalry; Arachosia in the south, a region of strategic passes; and Gandhara in the east, a center of trade and art. The Achaemenids brought a new level of administrative sophistication, standardized coinage, a network of royal roads, and a centralized bureaucracy that allowed for efficient tax collection and resource mobilization. Zoroastrianism, the empire's official religion, likely influenced local spiritual practices, though religious tolerance meant that pre-existing beliefs continued alongside Persian rituals. Afghanistan's position on the imperial frontier made it both valuable and volatile. While it supplied horses, soldiers, and minerals to the empire, it also harbored independent-minded mountain tribes who resisted Persian control. These rugged communities were accustomed to autonomy, and their sporadic uprisings foreshadowed a recurring pattern in Afghanistan's history. Foreign empires could conquer its cities, but winning the loyalty of its highland populations was another matter entirely. Alexander the Great and the Hellenistic legacy in 330 BCE. The armies of Alexander the Great swept into Afghanistan after defeating Darius III, the last Achaemenid ruler. If Alexander expected a swift conquest, he was soon disillusioned. The plains of Bactria fell quickly, but in the mountainous regions of Sogdiana and Parapamisa, modern-day Hindu Kush, Alexander faced relentless guerrilla warfare led by local leaders such as Spitamenes. These campaigns were among the most challenging of his career, forcing him to winter in the region and marry Roxana, a Bactrian noblewoman, in a calculated move to win local allegiance. To secure control, Alexander founded several cities, including Alexandria Arachosia, modern Kandahar, and Alexandria on the Oxus, which became hubs of Greek culture and governance. These settlements introduced new architectural styles, marketplaces and theaters, blending Greek urban planning with local traditions. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his empire fragmented, and Afghanistan became part of the Seleucid Empire, later breaking away under the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. This period saw a unique cultural fusion. Greek deities appeared alongside local gods on coins, and artisans combined Hellenistic realism with Central Asian motifs. Afghanistan, far from being a mere frontier, emerged as a center of cultural hybridity that would influence the region for centuries. The Kushan Empire, trade, culture, and religion by the late 2nd century BCE. The Greco-Bactrian kingdom had weakened under pressure from nomadic invasions, most notably by the Yuezhi tribes migrating from Central Asia. One branch of the Yuezhi, under the leadership of Kuyola Kadphises, consolidated power in Bactria and established the Kushan Empire in the 1st century CE. This empire expanded to cover most of Afghanistan, parts of Central Asia, and northern India. Its location made it the linchpin of the Silk Road, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and religions between East and West. The Kushans adopted a policy of cultural inclusivity, embracing Greek, Persian, Indian, and Central Asian traditions. Their coinage displayed a pantheon of deities from the Buddha to Persian gods to Greek Heracles, reflecting the empire's multi-religious nature. Under the reign of Kanishka, the Great c. 127 to 150 CE, Buddhism flourished on an unprecedented scale. Monasteries, stupas, and educational centers dotted the landscape, drawing monks and scholars from across Asia. The Gandhara art style, blending Greco-Roman realism with Buddhist symbolism, reached its zenith in Afghanistan during this time, producing some of the most iconic depictions of the Buddha in history. The Buddhist Golden Age and the Buddhas of Bamiyan, perhaps the most visible testament to Afghanistan's Buddhist era, were the Buddhas of Bamiyan. Colossal statues carved into sandstone cliffs in the Bamiyan Valley between the 3rd and 5th centuries CE, standing at 35 and 53 meters. These towering figures gazed serenely over a fertile valley that lay on one of the Silk Road's busiest arteries. Around them, hundreds of caves were carved into the cliffs, serving as monks' cells and decorated with intricate frescoes depicting scenes from the life of the Buddha. These artworks revealed a cosmopolitan aesthetic, the figures flowing robes resembled Greek togas, while their facial features reflected Indian influence, and the decorative motifs drew from Persian artistry. The Bamiyan Valley was more than a religious site. It was a cultural melting pot, where merchants, pilgrims, and diplomats from China, India, and the Mediterranean converged. This Buddhist Golden Age left an enduring imprint on Afghanistan's cultural memory, even as shifting political and religious tides would eventually see Buddhism replaced by Islam. By the 4th century, the Kushan Empire began to decline under pressure from the Sassanid Persians and the nomadic Huns, marking the end of one of the most vibrant periods in Afghan history. Yet the legacy of this era in art, architecture, and the spirit of cultural exchange would continue to shape Afghanistan for centuries. The arrival of Islam and the Safavid dynasty. Islam entered Afghanistan in the mid-7th century CE. During the rapid expansion of Arab armies following the death of Prophet Muhammad, initial attempts at conquest met with fierce resistance. The mountainous terrain of Afghanistan, combined with its fiercely independent tribal societies, made it far more difficult to subdue than many other regions of the Caliphate. Arab chroniclers recorded repeated campaigns against cities like Herat, Kandahar, and Kabul, which often shifted hands between Muslim commanders and local rulers. Conversion to Islam was not immediate. Many Afghans continued practicing Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, and local pagan traditions for centuries after the first Arab incursions. What truly anchored Islam in Afghanistan was not only military conquest, but also gradual cultural assimilation. Arab governors established garrisons in cities, built mosques, and introduced Arabic as a language of administration, though Persian and local tongues continued to flourish. By the 9th century, Islam had become deeply rooted, thanks in part to dynasties like the Saffarids. Founded by Yaqub ibn al-Layth al-Safar, a coppersmith-turned-general from Sistine, the Safarid dynasty rapidly expanded into Afghanistan and beyond. Unlike earlier Arab governors, Yaqub was a local Persian-speaking leader who sought to champion Islam in eastern Iran and Afghanistan. His rule signified a transition from foreign Arab administration to indigenous Muslim dynasties. Though the Safarid Empire was short-lived, it helped consolidate Islam across Afghanistan, replacing Buddhist monasteries with mosques and embedding Islamic law and scholarship into Afghan society. The Ghaznavid Empire, military power, and Persian culture. The late 10th century saw the rise of one of Afghanistan's most powerful dynasties, the Ghaznavids, based in the city of Ghazni. Founded by Alp Tighan and consolidated under Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, 998-1030. This empire stretched from eastern Iran through Afghanistan into much of northern India. Mahmud is often remembered as both a fearsome conqueror and a patron of the arts. Militarily, he launched over a dozen campaigns into India, targeting Hindu kingdoms and amassing enormous wealth that flowed back into Ghazni. These expeditions were celebrated in Islamic chronicles as jihads, though they also served the pragmatic purpose of funding his empire. Culturally, Ghazni became a jewel of the Islamic world. Mahmud's court attracted luminaries such as the poet Ferdowsi, author of the Shahnameh Book of Kings, which remains one of the greatest epics in Persian literature. The polymath al-Biruni, who studied astronomy, mathematics, and Indian philosophy, also flourished under Ghaznavid patronage. Ghazni itself was transformed into a city of grand mosques, libraries, and palaces, symbolizing the fusion of Persian cultural sophistication with Turkic military strength. The Ghaznavid dynasty thus not only spread Islam deeper into South Asia, but also cemented Persian as the language of high culture and administration in Afghanistan, a legacy that endures. In modern Dari Persian, the Ghurid dynasty and the minaret of Jam by the 12th century, the Ghaznavids weakened under pressure from rival powers, paving the way for the rise of the Ghurid dynasty, which emerged from the rugged mountains of Ghor province in central Afghanistan. Initially vassals of the Ghaznavids, the Ghurids soon carved out their own empire, stretching from eastern Iran to Bengal in India. Under rulers like Ghiyath-al-Din Muhammad and Muiz-al-Din Muhammad of Ghor, commonly known as Muhammad Ghori, they continued the expansion of Islamic rule in the Indian subcontinent. One of the Ghurids' most striking legacies is architectural. The minaret of Jam, a 65-meter high brick tower located in a remote valley of Ghor, built in the late 12th century. The minaret is covered with intricate Kufic inscriptions from the Quran and elaborate geometric patterns. Today, it stands as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, symbolizing Afghanistan's medieval architectural brilliance. The Ghurids also contributed to the development of Indo-Islamic architecture, as their successors in India, the Delhi Sultanate, built upon Ghurid traditions. However, like many Afghan dynasties, the Ghurids eventually fell to external pressures, particularly the advancing Mongols, who would bring devastation on an unprecedented scale. The Mongol invasion, destruction, and transformation in the early 13th century, Afghanistan became a major target of the Mongol Empire, founded by Genghis Khan. In 1219, after the Khwarezmian Shah executed Mongol envoys, Genghis Khan launched one of his most brutal campaigns, sweeping through Central Asia into Afghanistan. Cities like Balkh, Herat, and Ghazni were razed, their populations massacred or enslaved. Chroniclers described rivers running red with blood, and libraries filled with centuries of learning set aflame. Afghanistan's flourishing urban centers, many of which had been hubs of Islamic scholarship and trade, were devastated almost beyond recovery. Yet the Mongol period was not only one of destruction. In time, the region was absorbed into the Ilkhanate, a Mongol successor state that ruled Persia and much of Afghanistan. While the early Mongols were religiously tolerant, even indifferent, their successors converted to Islam, reintegrating Afghanistan into the wider Islamic world. Trade routes gradually revived under the Pax Mongolica, and Afghan cities once again became nodes of commerce linking China, India, and the Middle East. The scars of Mongol conquest, however, left a lasting memory. They became a symbol of the vulnerability of Afghanistan's wealth to foreign invaders, reinforcing the Afghan tendency to resist outsiders fiercely. The Timurid Renaissance in Herat following the decline of Mongol power. Afghanistan fell under the influence of Timur Tamerlane. In the late 14th century, a Turkic-Mongol conqueror from Samarkand, Timur established a vast empire that included much of Afghanistan, though his campaigns were often as brutal as those of the Mongols. His successors, the Timurids, ushered in a remarkable cultural renaissance, particularly in the city of Herat. By the 15th century, Herat had become a flourishing center of Persian art, literature, and science. The Timurid court patronized artists, poets, and scholars, producing some of the most exquisite examples of Persian miniature painting, calligraphy, and architecture. Figures like the poet Jami and the painter Behzad elevated Herat to the status of a cultural capital rivaling Florence during the European Renaissance. Timurid architecture, with its turquoise-tiled domes and elegant geometric designs, left enduring landmarks such as the Friday Mosque of Herat. The blending of Mongol, Turkic, and Persian traditions during this period helped shape the cultural identity of Afghanistan and the broader Persianate world. By the early 16th century, however, Timurid authority waned, giving way to new powers like the Uzbeks and the Mughals. Yet the memory of the Timurid Renaissance remained deeply embedded in Afghan heritage as a rare era when conquest gave way to creativity, and Afghanistan stood at the forefront of Islamic civilization. The Durrani Empire and the birth of Afghanistan. Foundation of modern Afghanistan is often traced to the rise of the Durrani Empire in the mid-18th century. In 1747, following the assassination of Nader Shah of Persia, his Afghan general, Ahmad Shah Abdali, was chosen as king by a tribal council in Kandahar. He took the title Ahmad Shah Durrani, becoming the founder of the Durrani dynasty. Under his leadership, Afghanistan became a formidable regional power, with conquests stretching from eastern Iran to Delhi in India and from the Amu Darya in the north to the Arabian Sea in the south. Ahmad Shah is remembered as the father of the nation in Afghan history, not only for uniting disparate Pashtun tribes under one banner, but also for laying the foundations of a state that would eventually evolve into modern Afghanistan. The Durrani Empire symbolized both the strength and fragility of Afghan political organization, while Ahmad Shah's charisma and military skill allowed him to hold together a vast multi-ethnic empire. Its unity was heavily dependent on his personal authority. After his death in 1772, succession disputes and tribal rivalries weakened the empire. Nevertheless, the Durranis left an enduring legacy. They introduced symbols of Afghan identity, reinforced Kabul and Kandahar as central power hubs, and set in motion the political dynamics, especially the role of tribal confederacies, and the dominance of Pashtuns that continue to shape Afghanistan's politics today. The Anglo-Afghan Wars and the Great Game, the 19th century. Afghanistan found itself caught in the Great Game, the strategic rivalry between the British Empire in India and the Russian Empire in Central Asia. Both sought to expand their influence, and Afghanistan, lying between them, became a buffer state. The British attempted to install rulers who would be friendly to their interests, while Afghans fiercely resisted foreign interference. This tension erupted into the First Anglo-Afghan War, 1839 to 1842. When the British invaded, deposed Emir Dost Muhammad Khan, and installed Shah Shuja as a puppet ruler. However, Afghan resistance culminated in the annihilation of a retreating British garrison in 1842. One of the most humiliating defeats in British imperial history. Two more conflicts followed. The Second Anglo-Afghan War 1878-188, and the Third Anglo-Afghan War 1919. The Second War resulted in the Treaty of Gandamak, which gave the British control over Afghanistan's foreign affairs while allowing internal autonomy. The Third War, however, fought under King Amanullah Khan, led to Afghanistan's full independence, formalized by the Treaty of Rawalpindi in 1919. These wars reinforced Afghanistan's reputation as the graveyard of empires, a place where foreign invaders could enter but rarely impose long-lasting control. At the same time, they entrenched the idea of Afghanistan as a buffer state, its sovereignty constantly tested by global powers but fiercely defended by its people. Reform, monarchy, and political upheaval 20th century, the early 20th century. In Afghanistan was marked by attempts at modernization and reform, balanced uneasily against traditional tribal and religious structures. King Amanullah Khan, 1919 to 1929, sought to modernize Afghanistan along the lines of Turkey under Ataturk, introducing constitutional reforms, promoting women's education, and reducing the influence of conservative clerics. However, his reforms sparked backlash, leading to tribal revolts that forced him into exile. Subsequent rulers, including Nader Shah and later Zahir Shah, promoted a more cautious approach, preserving modernization in limited doses while maintaining traditional structures. The reign of King Zahir Shah, 1933 to 1973, in particular, is remembered as a relatively stable period. Afghanistan remained neutral during World War II and carefully navigated Cold War politics by accepting aid from both the United States and the Soviet Union. The 1960s brought a new constitution, parliamentary elections, and a brief democratic opening, though it was hampered by weak institutions and corruption. In 1973, Zahir Shah was overthrown in a coup by his cousin Mohammad Daud Khan, who declared a republic. This marked the end of Afghanistan's monarchy and the beginning of a series of increasingly turbulent decades. The Soviet invasion and Civil War. Afghanistan's troubles escalated in 1978 with the Saur Revolution, when the Communist People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan (PDPA) seized power in a coup. Their radical reforms, including land redistribution and secularization, met with widespread resistance, particularly from rural and religious communities. To support the fragile PDPA regime, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in December 1979, beginning a brutal decade-long war. The Soviet-Afghan War devastated the country. Millions of Afghans were displaced as refugees, primarily to Pakistan and Iran, while insurgent groups known as the Mujahideen, supported by the United States, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and others, waged a relentless guerrilla war. The Soviets eventually withdrew in 1989, but Afghanistan descended into civil war as rival Mujahideen factions fought for control. Kabul was heavily bombarded, infrastructure collapsed, and lawlessness spread. Amid this chaos, the Taliban, a movement of religious students trained in Pakistan, emerged in the mid-1990s, promising stability through strict enforcement of Islamic law. They captured Kabul in 1996 and established the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Their regime was internationally isolated, recognized by only a few countries, and condemned for human rights abuses, particularly against women. Yet they managed to impose a harsh order over much of the country until the next global conflict reshaped Afghanistan once more. The U.S.-led intervention, Taliban return, and the present, the Taliban's decision to harbor Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda. After the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks brought global attention back to Afghanistan. In October 2001, a U.S.-led coalition invaded, swiftly toppling the Taliban regime. A new government was established under Hamid Karzai, followed by Ashraf Ghani, with heavy international involvement. Billions of dollars in aid poured into Afghanistan, supporting infrastructure, education, and democratic institutions. Yet corruption, weak governance, and the resurgence of the Taliban undermined these efforts. Despite 2 decades of military presence, NATO forces could not secure a decisive victory. In August 2021, following the withdrawal of U.S. and allied forces, the Taliban launched a rapid offensive that culminated in the fall of Kabul. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan was re-established, ending the U.S.-backed republic. Today, Afghanistan faces enormous challenges: international isolation, economic collapse, humanitarian crises, restrictions on women's rights, and ongoing threats from extremist groups like ISIS. Yet, like throughout its long history, Afghanistan remains a land of resilience, a nation that has endured conquest, collapse, and rebirth countless times, always retaining its distinct identity at the crossroads of Asia. Ethnic groups and identity. Afghanistan's culture is inseparable from its ethnic diversity, which has shaped its social fabric for millennia. The country is home to more than a dozen ethnic groups, the largest being the Pashtuns, who form a plurality of the population. Traditionally known for their tribal structure and adherence to Pashtunwali, a customary code of honor, hospitality, and justice, Pashtuns have historically dominated political leadership. The Tajiks, primarily Persian-speaking, are concentrated in the northeast and central cities, and have played a central role in Afghanistan's literary and political life. The Hazaras, who are predominantly Shia Muslims and believed to be descendants of Mongol settlers, inhabit the central highlands of Hazarajat. For centuries, they faced discrimination, but they have also developed a rich cultural identity characterized by oral traditions and distinctive art. Other significant groups include the Uzbeks and Turkmen in the north, both with strong Turkic heritage, the Nuristanis, whose ancestors resisted Islam until the late 19th century, and smaller minorities such as Imaks, Baluch, and Pashai. Each of these groups contributes to Afghanistan's rich cultural mosaic, and despite political struggles, many Afghans take pride in this diversity. Ethnic identity is both a unifying force, celebrating the nation's pluralism, and a dividing factor, as political rivalries often align with ethnic lines. Yet, in daily life, shared traditions from hospitality to music and poetry create bonds that transcend group differences. Languages and literary heritage. The linguistic diversity of Afghanistan reflects its role as a crossroads of civilizations. The 2 official languages are Dari, Afghan, Persian, and Pashto, both belonging to the Indo-Iranian family. Dari serves as the lingua franca spoken widely across urban centers, while Pashto dominates in the southern and eastern provinces. Other languages such as Uzbek, Turkmen, Baluchi, Pashai, and Nuristani are also spoken, underscoring the nation's multilingual character. Language is not merely a means of communication, but also a vessel of cultural expression, particularly through Afghanistan's long tradition of poetry and storytelling. Afghanistan has produced some of the most celebrated figures in Persian literature, including Rumi, the 13th century Sufi poet whose works continue to inspire worldwide. Though Rumi spent much of his life in Anatolia, his birthplace in Balkh remains a source of pride for Afghans. Later, poets like Khosrow, Balkhi, Jami, and Khalili enriched the Persian literary canon, while Pashto literature blossomed under poets such as Kushal Khan Khadak. Oral traditions remain equally important, with epic tales like the Shannom and folk stories told around hearths, preserving collective memory and wisdom. Even amid war, Afghans have turned to poetry as a form of resilience, with contemporary writers exploring themes of exile, loss, and hope. Music traditions. Music has long held a special place in Afghan culture, though it has also faced challenges from conservative interpretations of religion that sought to ban it. Traditional Afghan music is an intricate blend of Persian, Indian, Turkic, and Central Asian influences, reflecting the country's geographic position. Instruments such as the rubab, a lute-like instrument considered Afghanistan's national instrument, the tabla, the dambora, and the harmonium are central to its soundscapes. The rubab, in particular, is often associated with spiritual depth and national pride. Regional styles vary. Pashto music often emphasizes rhythmic patterns and epic storytelling. Hazara music incorporates influences from Mongol heritage and tends to feature the dambura. Tajik music resonates with Persian classical forms. Ghazals, lyrical poems set to music, are popular across communities. Despite restrictions during Taliban rule in the late 1990s, Afghan music survived in exile, especially in Pakistan, Iran, and the West, and made a resurgence in the early 2000s with new generations of musicians, blending traditional sounds with modern genres. Notable artists such as Ahmad Zahir, sometimes called the Afghan Elvis, remain icons across generations, his songs embodying nostalgia, romance, and national pride. Dance and folk traditions. Dance in Afghanistan is deeply tied to social celebration and cultural expression. One of the most recognized folk dances is the Atan, often performed at weddings, festivals, and gatherings. The Atan, which originated among Pashtun tribes, involves men and, in some communities, women forming a circle, moving rhythmically to the beat of drums and rubab, and gradually increasing in intensity. It is more than entertainment. It is a ritual of unity, endurance, and cultural pride, sometimes lasting for hours. Other ethnic groups maintain their own dance traditions. Hazaras perform dances linked to the dambura, while Uzbeks and Turkmen favor dances with Central Asian influences. Folk performances often blend music, dance, and storytelling, especially during Nowruz, the Persian New Year, and harvest celebrations. These traditions have survived despite repeated efforts by conservative forces to suppress them, a testament to their deep cultural roots. In exile communities abroad, Afghan dances continue to be performed, not only as a way of preserving heritage, but also as a bridge for younger generations growing up far from their ancestral homeland. Continuity and resilience in cultural expression. What makes Afghanistan's cultural heritage remarkable is its resilience. For centuries, waves of conquest and political upheaval could have erased its traditions. Yet poetry, music, and dance have survived, adapting to each era. Even when regimes sought to silence artistic expression, Afghans found ways to preserve their culture, whether through underground performances, oral traditions, or diaspora communities abroad. Culture for Afghans is not simply an aesthetic dimension of life, but a means of survival, identity, and connection. The interplay of ethnic diversity, rich languages, celebrated poetry, vibrant music, and communal dance demonstrates the vitality of Afghan culture. It is a culture both ancient and living, deeply rooted in tradition but open to new influences. Despite decades of war and displacement, Afghan people continue to express themselves through art, song, and literature, reaffirming that while political regimes may rise and fall, the spirit of Afghanistan lives on in its culture, religion, and spiritual life. Religion lies at the heart of Afghanistan's cultural identity. The vast majority of Afghans are Muslims, with around 85 to 90% Sunni, primarily of the Hanafi school, and about 10 to 15% Shia, mostly among the Hazara and Kizilbash communities. Islam is not just a matter of personal faith, but a framework that influences law, ethics, social customs, and politics. Mosques serve as centers of both worship and community gathering, while religious scholars ulama hold moral authority in shaping public life. Historically, Sufi traditions have also played a major role, with shrines dedicated to saints serving as places of pilgrimage and spiritual healing. Religion also manifests in daily rituals, the 5 daily prayers, the Friday congregational prayer, fasting during Ramadan, and almsgiving. Afghan religious life combines orthodox practices with deep-rooted traditions, such as respect for elders, hospitality as a sacred duty, and commemoration of religious festivals. Even in the most modern cities, Islam permeates art, architecture, music, and poetry, providing a shared cultural foundation that unites Afghanistan's many ethnic groups despite political and social divisions. Festivals and celebrations. Afghanistan's cultural calendar is filled with festivals that reflect both Islamic devotion and ancient traditions. The most important religious festivals are Eid al-Fitr, marking the end of Ramadan, and Eid al-Adha, commemorating Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son. These festivals are celebrated with communal prayers, visits to relatives, giving of alms, and festive meals. Streets come alive with new clothes, decorated bazaars, and gatherings that strengthen social bonds. Another major celebration is Nowruz, the Persian New Year observed at the spring equinox. Though rooted in pre-Islamic Zoroastrian traditions, Nowruz remains widely celebrated, especially in the northern regions and urban centers. Families prepare the haft miwa, a dish of 7 dried fruits, visit shrines such as Mazar-e Sharif's Blue Mosque, and perform traditional dances and music. Regional festivals also abound. Harvest celebrations, weddings filled with music and dance, and tribal gatherings that reaffirm kinship ties. Despite decades of war, Afghans continue to mark these occasions with joy. For festivals represent moments of continuity, resilience, and cultural pride in the face of hardship. Afghan cuisine food is another powerful expression of Afghan culture, blending influences from Persian, Indian, Turkic, and Central Asian cuisines. Afghan meals often emphasize balance, with rice, bread, meat, and vegetables forming the staples. The most iconic dish is Kabuli pulaf, a fragrant rice pilaf cooked with lamb, carrots, raisins, and spices, often regarded as the national dish. Bread, especially the round naan baked in clay tandoors, accompanies nearly every meal. Other popular dishes include mantu, dumplings filled with spiced meat and topped with yogurt and lentils, ashak leek-filled dumplings, often associated with kabul, and kebabs of various kinds. Dairy products like yogurt and curate dried yogurt balls are widely used, while tea, often green or black with cardamom, is the beverage of choice and a symbol of hospitality. Afghan sweets, such as sheer kurma, a milk and vermicelli dessert served during Eid, reflect both Islamic traditions and regional creativity. Beyond nutrition, Afghan cuisine embodies hospitality. Serving generous meals to guests is considered an honor and a sacred duty, no matter the host's economic condition. Clothing and traditional dress. Afghan clothing reflects the country's ethnic diversity, climate, and traditions. For men, the most common attire is the shalwar kameez, a long tunic worn over loose trousers, often accompanied by a waistcoat and the distinctive pakal or turban. Women's clothing varies by region and community, but generally includes long dresses with vibrant embroidery, trousers, and scarves or shawls. The chador or burqa, which covers the entire body, has historically been worn in some areas, though its use has been influenced by social norms, politics, and religious interpretations. Traditional clothing is especially rich in embroidery and color. Each ethnic group has its own style. Hazara dresses often feature bright floral patterns. Tajik and Uzbek outfits emphasize fine embroidery, and Pashtun dresses are recognized for their bold designs and jewelry. Handcrafted textiles, such as silk, wool, and cotton have been integral to Afghan identity for centuries. with artisans passing down weaving and embroidery techniques through generations. Even as Western-style clothing has become more common in cities, traditional dress remains an enduring symbol of Afghan culture, especially during weddings, festivals, and formal gatherings. Continuity through faith and traditional religion, festivals, cuisine, and clothing together form the fabric of Afghan daily life. Despite decades of conflict, displacement, and modernization pressures, these cultural practices have survived and adapted, providing Afghans with a strong sense of continuity. Faith offers moral guidance and spiritual strength, while festivals bring joy and reaffirm identity. Food is not only nourishment, but also a medium of hospitality, and clothing expresses both individuality and shared heritage. In exile communities around the world, Afghan traditions continue to thrive, serving as a bridge between generations and a reminder of home. For Afghans, these cultural expressions are not superficial customs, but the very essence of survival, a way of maintaining dignity and belonging in a world that has often been unstable and harsh. Religion provides the soul, festivals the rhythm, food the warmth, and clothing the color of Afghanistan's cultural life, visual arts, and handicrafts. Afghanistan's artistic heritage reflects centuries of being at the crossroads of civilizations. From the Hellenistic influence of ancient Greco-Bactrian kingdoms to the Persian, Islamic, and Central Asian traditions that followed, Afghan visual arts embody diversity and adaptability. Traditional handicrafts remain a cornerstone of Afghan identity, with weaving, embroidery, pottery, and jewelry deeply rooted in everyday life. Afghan carpets and rugs, renowned worldwide for their intricate patterns and durability, symbolize both artistry and livelihood. Each region produces distinct designs. Turkmen rugs are known for bold geometric patterns, Baluchi rugs for deep red hues, and Hazara weavings for fine embroidery. Calligraphy, an art form closely tied to Islam, flourished in Afghanistan, with Quranic verses and poetry inscribed on mosques, manuscripts, and everyday objects. Miniature painting, influenced by Persian traditions, reached a high point in the Timurid era in Herat, where artists like Behzad set new standards of refinement. In modern times, despite political turmoil, Afghan artists continue to innovate. From painting and sculpture to contemporary photography, often reflecting the themes of war, displacement, and resilience. Architecture across the ages of Afghan architecture is a living chronicle of its history. Ancient Buddhist stupas and monasteries once dotted the landscape, most famously the colossal Buddhas of Bamiyan, carved into cliffs during the 6th century and tragically destroyed in 2001. Islamic architecture introduced magnificent mosques, minarets, and mausoleums characterized by intricate tilework, calligraphy, and geometric designs. The Minaret of Jam, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, stands as a stunning example of 12th century Islamic artistry and engineering. Cities like Herat, Balkh, Ghazni, and Mazar-e Sharif became centers of cultural and architectural brilliance, adorned with turquoise domes, elaborate shrines, and madrasas. The Blue Mosque in Mazar-e Sharif, with its dazzling mosaics, remains a centerpiece of Afghan spiritual life. Even Kabul, despite modernization and conflict, retains architectural gems that echo its layered history. Rural architecture, mud brick homes, fortified compounds, kalas, and terraced villages reflects both environmental adaptation and social traditions. Together, these structures form not only a record of Afghanistan's past, but also a foundation for future cultural revival. Performing arts and theater. While music and poetry often dominate cultural memory, theater and performing arts have also played roles in Afghan society. Traditional storytelling, kissakhani in bazaars and tea houses, once brought together communities to hear tales of heroes, saints, and epic adventures. Puppetry, especially in rural areas, entertained children, while passing down moral lessons. During the 20th century, modern theater emerged in Kabul, often performed in Dari and Pashto, combining social themes with classical influences. Though political instability disrupted these traditions, theater persisted, especially in exile communities. In recent decades, NGOs and cultural organizations have revived performance arts as tools for education, gender awareness, and healing. Plays about war, migration, and peacebuilding have been staged in schools, cultural centers, and even refugee camps, proving that art is not merely entertainment, but a means of dialogue and resilience. Modern cultural challenges and resilience. Afghanistan's cultural life has faced severe threats over the past half-century. Decades of war, destroyed monuments, displaced artisans, and endangered traditional practices. The destruction of the Buddhas of Bamiyan and looting of the National Museum in Kabul symbolize the vulnerability of Afghan heritage. Restrictions on music, dance, and visual arts during Taliban rule in the late 1990s silenced public cultural expression. Yet Afghans, both within the country and in the diaspora, preserved traditions through private gatherings, exile media, and underground art. In the post-2001 period, there was a cultural revival. Television channels, broadcast music, and drama. Literature flourished, and young artists experimented with film, digital art, and photography. Kabul's cultural festivals and Herat's literary gatherings demonstrated renewed vitality. Even after 2021, when restrictions tightened again, Afghans continued to use online platforms, diaspora networks, and creative adaptation to keep cultural expression alive. This resilience shows that culture in Afghanistan is not easily extinguished. It evolves under pressure, often becoming stronger in adversity. The soul of Afghanistan's culture. Afghanistan's arts, architecture, and cultural expressions are more than historical achievements. They are the soul of the nation. They tell stories of conquest and creativity, destruction and renewal, despair and hope. Whether in the timeless weaving of a rug, the calligraphy on a mosque wall, the ruins of Bamiyan, or the rhythm of the Atan, Afghan culture endures as a living testament to the people's resilience. It connects Afghans to their ancestors, sustains them in hardship, and projects their identity to the world. Despite political challenges and external threats, Afghanistan's culture remains a source of pride and unity. The creative spirit, expressed in art, architecture, and performance, is inseparable from Afghan survival. It ensures that while regimes may suppress and wars may destroy, the essence of Afghanistan will always find ways to flourish. Through its culture, Afghanistan continues to declare not only its existence, but also its vitality, creativity, and humanity. The mountains and highlands. Afghanistan is often described as the heart of Asia. Its geography is dominated by rugged mountains that have shaped its history, culture, and politics. The Hindu Kush Range stretches across central and northeastern Afghanistan. Peaks rise above 7,000 meters, with Noshak being the tallest, at 7,492 meters. These mountains form natural barriers and guide patterns of settlement, communication, and defense. Historically, passes like the Saling Pass and the Khyber Pass connected Afghanistan with Central Asia, India, and beyond, making it a crossroads of civilizations. The mountainous terrain has also played a role in Afghanistan's reputation as a graveyard of empires. Invaders struggled to control its steep valleys, narrow passes, and fortified villages. At the same time, these highlands nurtured distinct cultural identities among isolated communities. The remoteness of many regions has preserved traditions, dialects, and tribal structures, reinforcing Afghanistan's diversity and resilience. River systems and valleys. Although Afghanistan is mostly dry, rivers and valleys are lifelines of fertility. The Amu Darya in the north marks the border with Central Asia. The Helmand River, Afghanistan's longest, flows through the southwest into Iran. Other major rivers include the Kabul River, which connects to Pakistan, and the Hari Rud in the west. These waterways have long supported farming, cities, and trade. Valleys along their courses are among the most densely populated areas. The Kabul River Valley has been a strategic route linking South Asia and Central Asia. The fertile Khandas and Helmand valleys are important agricultural zones. Irrigation canals, some built centuries ago, channel river water into farmlands. Despite droughts, valleys remain the heart of Afghanistan's agricultural economy, producing wheat, fruits, and vegetables. The contrast between fertile valleys and barren uplands shows Afghanistan's geographic duality, with hardship and abundance side by side, deserts and arid plains besides mountains. Vast deserts and plains also shape Afghanistan. The Registan Desert in the south and the Dasht-e-Margao, known as the Desert of Death. In the southwest are barren areas of sand and gravel, marked by heat and scarce water. These deserts, though harsh, have long served as trade routes and grazing grounds for nomadic herders. To the north, the Central Asian steppes extend into Afghanistan, offering pastures that once attracted Turkic and Mongol migrations. The deserts highlight Afghanistan's environmental challenges. Sandstorms, drought, and desertification limit farming, forcing people to rely on oasis, agriculture, and herding. Yet these dry lands also hide valuable wealth. Natural gas, copper, and rare minerals lie beneath the surface. This mix of harsh land and hidden resources has shaped Afghanistan's history of struggle and opportunity, climate zones, and seasonal extremes. Afghanistan's geography creates dramatic climate variation. The high mountains face cold, snowy winters, and some valleys are cut off for months. Southern deserts endure very hot summers, with temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius or 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Central regions, such as Kabul, have a semi-dry climate with cold winters and hot summers. Eastern areas, near Pakistan, receive heavier rainfall and are relatively green. This diversity allows Afghanistan to support both alpine pastures and orchards. Grapes, pomegranates, apricots, and melons grow in temperate valleys, while wheat is the main crop across the country. But climate extremes also bring danger. Floods occur during spring, drought strikes in summer, and harsh winters isolate villages. These conditions make Afghan life a constant struggle with nature, requiring resilience and cooperation, geographic challenges, and strategic importance. Afghanistan's land and climate are both blessings and burdens. Mountains give defense and identity, but limit communication and trade. Rivers and valleys sustain farming, but suffer from drought and overuse. Deserts resist settlement, yet hide valuable resources. The climate tests survival, but also allows varied crops. Geography also explains Afghanistan's global importance. Its location at the crossroads of Central Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East has made it a hub of trade, migration, and conquest. From Silk Road caravans to modern politics, Afghanistan's landscape ensures it cannot be ignored. Mineral wealth and untapped potential beneath Afghanistan's rugged land lies huge wealth in natural resources. Studies by Afghan and international geologists have found large reserves of copper, iron ore, gold, cobalt, lithium, rare earth elements, oil, and natural gas. The Aina copper deposit in Logar province is one of the largest in the world. Lithium deposits in Ghazni and Helmand are important for the future global energy economy, especially for batteries. Coal, marble, and semi-precious stones, such as lapis lazuli from Badakhshan, mined since ancient times, add to this treasure. Despite this wealth, Afghanistan's resources remain mostly unused because of decades of war, weak infrastructure, and political instability. Illegal mining and poor regulation have cost the country billions. World powers eye these resources, making Afghanistan not only a crossroads of geography, but also a center of competition in the 21st century. Agriculture. As the backbone of society, farming has been the backbone of Afghan life for thousands of years. Nearly 70% of the people are involved in farming or herding, depending on irrigated valleys and seasonal rains. Wheat is the staple crop, supported by rice, maize, and barley. Afghanistan is famous for its fruits, such as pomegranates from Kandahar, grapes from Herat, melons from Kandahar, apricots, mulberries, and almonds, long exported across Asia. Livestock herding, especially sheep and goats, supports nomadic and semi-nomadic groups like the Kuchi. Wool, milk, and meat are vital for families and trade. Afghan farmers show resilience by using irrigation systems, known as crossroads, underground canals that bring water from mountain springs to fields. These systems reflect Afghan skill in adapting to tough land, environmental challenges, and deforestation. Afghanistan's environment faces serious problems, worsened by conflict and population growth. Deforestation is urgent. Forests in Nuristan, Kunar, and Paksha have been destroyed by logging and fuel needs. This loss has caused soil erosion, floods, and desertification. Overgrazing by livestock has further damaged fragile land. Water scarcity is another key issue. Rivers once used for irrigation are now strained by climate change, poor management, and disputes with neighbors. Droughts have caused food shortages, migration, and rising poverty. Environmental damage has social and political effects, making resource management one of Afghanistan's biggest challenges. The role of poppy cultivation. One of the most controversial crops is the opium poppy. Since the late 20th century, Afghanistan has been the world's top producer of opium, at times making more than 80% of global supply. Poppy grows well in dry climate with little water, and its high value attracts poor farmers. For many, it has been the only reliable income during war. But the consequences are serious. Poppy farming supports drug addiction, corruption, and crime. Armed groups and warlords have controlled the trade to fund conflict. Eradication programs have often hurt poor farmers but failed to reduce demand. The persistence of poppy shows the link between geography, economy, and politics in Afghanistan. Sustainable development and future prospects. Afghanistan's natural resources and farming potential offer hope, but only if managed wisely. Using mineral wealth could make Afghanistan a key global supplier of raw materials. But it needs investment, stability, and transparency. Improving farming through irrigation, crop variety, better market access could boost food security and reduce dependency on aid. At the same time, environmental conservation must become a priority. Reforestation, water management, and protection of biodiversity are crucial to preventing ecological collapse. International organizations and Afghan innovators have proposed solar-powered irrigation, ecotourism, and sustainable forestry as ways forward. Ultimately, Afghanistan's geography provides not only challenges but also immense opportunities. With peace, effective governance, and sustainable policies, the land could once again support prosperity as it did during earlier periods of Silk Road. Flourishing. Regional diversity within Afghanistan's geography is not uniform. It is divided into distinct regions, each with its own landscape, resources, and culture. The Central Highlands, dominated by the Hindu Kush, are home to valleys, gorges, and isolated villages where agriculture depends on irrigation and livestock. The northern plains, stretching toward the Amu Darya, offer fertile farmland and access to Central Asian trade routes. The southern plateau, including Kandahar and Helmand, is semi-arid but historically significant as a crossroads of tribal kafta. In the east, provinces like Nangarhar and Kunar lie close to Pakistan, serving as gateways between South Asia and the Afghan interior. The western region, centered around Herat, connects with Iran, and has historically been a hub of Persian influence, architecture, and commerce. Each region reflects a unique blend of geography and history, shaping local identity while contributing to Afghanistan's overall mosaic. International borders and neighbors. Afghanistan is a landlocked country, sharing borders with 6 nations: Pakistan, 2,670 kilometers; Iran, 921 kilometers; Turkmenistan, 804 kilometers; Uzbekistan, 144 kilometers; Tajikistan, 1,357 kilometers; and China, 76 kilometers. These frontiers are more than lines on a map. They are historical meeting points of cultures, trade, and conflict. The long border with Pakistan, much of it defined by the disputed Durand Line, has been particularly contentious, influencing ethnic ties among Pashtuns on both sides. The northern borders with Central Asian states provide access to Russia and Eurasia, while the western border with Iran connects Afghanistan to the Persian world and, through the Persian Gulf, to global trade networks. The tiny border with China, located in the remote Wakhan corridor, symbolizes Afghanistan's position as a geographic hinge between East and West. This unique location makes Afghanistan both vulnerable to external interference and central to international strategy. The legacy of the Silk Road. Afghanistan's geography placed it at the heart of the Silk Road, the ancient trade network linking China, India, Persia, and the Mediterranean. Cities like Herat, Balkh, and Kandahar flourished as centers of commerce, religion, and scholarship. Caravans carried silk, spices, gemstones, and ideas through Afghan mountain passes and valleys, making the region a melting pot of cultures and religions, from Buddhism and Zoroastrianism to Islam. Though modern infrastructure has been slow to develop, Afghanistan still holds potential to reclaim this role. Proposed projects such as railway links to Central Asia, energy pipelines, and regional highways envision Afghanistan as a hub of Eurasian connectivity. Its geography ensures that the nation, if stable, could serve as a bridge rather than a barrier between regions. Strategic importance in modern geopolitics. In the modern era, Afghanistan's location has given it outsized importance in global affairs. During the 19th century Great Game, Britain and Russia competed for influence over Afghanistan as a buffer state between empires. In the 20th and 21st centuries, Afghanistan's proximity to the Middle East, South Asia, and Central Asia made it a focal point of Cold War rivalry, Soviet invasion, and U.S.-led intervention. Its borders touch nuclear powers Pakistan, China, and resource-rich Central Asia, magnifying its strategic weight. Today, Afghanistan remains critical to regional security and trade. Neighboring states view it through the lens of ethnic ties, water resources, security threats, and economic corridors. Pakistan seeks influence for strategic depth. Iran monitors Afghan Shia communities and water flows. And China looks to Afghanistan's minerals and Belt and Road Initiative routes. Afghanistan's geography ensures that it remains central to the ambitions of both regional and global powers. Afghanistan as a crossroads of the future. Afghanistan's regions, borders, and position at the intersection of civilizations continue to define its destiny. Geography has made it both a prize and a challenge for empires, a land of opportunity and hardship. If conflict and instability persist, the same geography that enabled invasions and smuggling will continue to hinder progress. But if Afghanistan achieves stability, its location could once again make it a gateway for trade, cultural exchange, and cooperation across Asia. Ultimately, Afghanistan's story is inseparable from its geography. Its mountains, rivers, deserts, and borders are not merely natural features, but forces that shape history, society, and politics. The future of Afghanistan will depend on how its people and neighbors choose to navigate the opportunities and challenges presented by this unique and strategic land. The return of the Taliban 2021 in August 2021. After the withdrawal of US and NATO forces and the collapse of the Afghan Republic, the Taliban swiftly regained control of Kabul, marking the end of a 20-year US-backed government. The fall of Kabul shocked the world, as the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, once considered one of the largest in the region, disintegrated with little resistance. The Taliban's return was framed as a victory over foreign occupation. But for many Afghans, it triggered fear, uncertainty, and a wave of displacement. Women, minority groups, and those who had worked with Western organizations feared reprisals and a rollback of freedoms gained since 2001. This sudden power shift reshaped not only Afghanistan's internal politics, but also its standing on the global stage. Structure of Taliban governance. The Taliban now rule through what they call the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Decision-making is concentrated around the supreme leader Hibatullah Akhundzada, based in Kandahar. Unlike the previous republic, the Taliban system lacks elections, political parties, and open debate. Power is distributed among a small council of clerics, military commanders, and provincial governors loyal to the movement. Laws are based on their interpretation of Sharia, with policies aimed at enforcing strict religious codes. The Taliban leadership remains largely secretive, with minimal public appearances by top figures. Unlike modern governments with ministries functioning in transparency, Taliban governance is shaped by ideological rigidity, internal factionalism, and attempts to balance traditional Afghan tribal politics with the demands of running a modern state. This has created tensions between hardliners who favor strict isolationist policies and pragmatists who argue for international engagement to avoid economic collapse. Restrictions on rights and freedoms. One of the most striking features of Taliban rule has been the rollback of women's rights. Women have been barred from most secondary schools, universities, government jobs, and many aspects of public life. The Ministry for Women's Affairs was replaced by the Ministry for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice, tasked with enforcing strict codes of dress and behavior. These restrictions have drawn widespread condemnation from Afghans and the international community alike, with the United Nations calling it a form of gender apartheid. Freedom of the press has also sharply declined. Dozens of independent media outlets have been closed, and journalists face harassment, detention, or worse. Civil society organizations that flourished between 2001 and 2021 have been silenced or pushed underground. The Taliban justifies these measures as consistent with their religious values. But for millions of Afghans, especially women and youth who experienced 2 decades of relative openness, this represents a profound loss of rights, security, and internal control. Ironically, while Taliban governance is deeply repressive, many Afghans acknowledge that street-level security has improved compared to the previous years of war. Large-scale battles, suicide bombings, and U.S. airstrikes have largely ended, allowing people in cities like Kabul, Kandahar, and Herat to live without constant fear of explosions. Checkpoints are manned by Taliban fighters who maintain strict law enforcement, sometimes through harsh punishments. However, challenges remain. The Islamic State Khorasan province ISIS-K continues to launch deadly attacks, particularly targeting Shia minorities, schools, and mosques. Tribal disputes and rivalries among Taliban factions also pose risks to stability. Thus, while large-scale warfare has ended, the specter of terrorism, factionalism, and repression prevents Afghanistan from achieving genuine peace. International isolation and legitimacy struggles. The Taliban face a major obstacle: lack of international recognition. No country has formally recognized the Islamic Emirate as the legitimate government of Afghanistan, though some, including Pakistan, China, Qatar, and Russia, maintain working relations. The Taliban's treatment of women, ties to terrorism, and rigid governance have blocked efforts to gain broader legitimacy. This leaves Afghanistan isolated from global financial systems, preventing access to billions of dollars in frozen foreign reserves and international aid. The Taliban's isolation has worsened the humanitarian crisis, leaving Afghans trapped between a government unable to provide basic services and an international community reluctant to fully engage without reforms. This limbo has defined Afghanistan's political landscape since 2021, with the Taliban clinging to power but unable to offer a clear vision of progress. Collapse of the Afghan economy. After the Taliban takeover in 2021, Afghanistan's economy faced near total collapse. The sudden withdrawal of international aid, which had previously accounted for nearly 75% of government spending, left ministries, hospitals, and schools without funding. Billions of dollars of Afghan assets were frozen abroad, cutting off access to foreign reserves. Banks restricted withdrawals, businesses shut down, and unemployment skyrocketed. Farmers, traders, and shopkeepers who had relied on aid-driven markets saw demand vanish almost overnight. The crisis deepened as sanctions prevented Afghanistan from accessing international financial systems. Even humanitarian organizations faced hurdles transferring money into the country. The result was a severe liquidity shortage, rising poverty, and the near paralysis of the formal economy. For ordinary Afghans, this translated into empty shelves, skyrocketing food prices, and wages worth less than the cost of survival. Widespread poverty and hunger. The economic breakdown has created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. According to United Nations estimates, more than 90% of Afghans live below the poverty line, and millions struggle to afford daily meals. Severe droughts, coupled with the collapse of irrigation systems and supply chains, have worsened food insecurity. Parents are often forced to choose between selling household possessions, marrying off young daughters, or pulling children out of school simply to afford bread. The situation is especially dire in rural areas, where farmers depend on seasonal harvests. Crop failures and limited access to markets mean that malnutrition is widespread, particularly among children. Humanitarian agencies warn that without sustained aid, Afghanistan faces the risk of famine-like conditions, making it one of the gravest food security emergencies in the modern world. The role of aid and international assistance, despite political isolation. Afghanistan still receives limited humanitarian aid through organizations like the UN, Red Crescent, and various NGOs. These groups provide emergency food distributions, healthcare services, and shelter for displaced families. However, the aid system operates under constant pressure. Taliban restrictions on female aid workers have hampered operations. Since women are essential for reaching female beneficiaries in conservative communities, donor fatigue is also a challenge. After decades of investment in Afghanistan with limited, visible progress, many countries hesitate to commit large sums. Sanctions and frozen assets complicate financial transfers, forcing aid groups to work in cash or barter-based systems. Thus, while humanitarian aid provides some relief, it cannot replace a functioning national economy. Afghans remain caught in a cycle of dependence without a clear pathway to long-term recovery. The shadow economy and coping mechanisms with the formal economy paralyzed. Many Afghans survive through informal or illicit means. Street vendors, small-scale traders, and laborers rely on fragile local markets. Some families turn to remittances sent from relatives abroad, though even these are restricted by international banking limits. Others depend on barter trade, exchanging goods instead of money. The drug trade, particularly the cultivation of opium poppies, has long been Afghanistan's most lucrative illegal industry. The Taliban announced a ban on opium cultivation in 2022, but enforcement is inconsistent. For many farmers, opium is the only reliable source of income. Meanwhile, smuggling networks transport fuel, goods, and people across porous borders, sustaining An underground economy that enriches warlords and Taliban officials, but leaves ordinary Afghans struggling. Human cost and future outlook. The humanitarian crisis is not just economic, it is deeply human. Families are torn apart by migration, with young men seeking work abroad in Iran, Pakistan, or the Gulf, while leaving behind vulnerable households. Child labor has surged, with boys working in markets and mines, while girls are forced into early marriages. Hospitals struggle with shortages of medicine, electricity, and trained staff, leaving millions without access to healthcare. Looking ahead, Afghanistan's survival depends on whether the Taliban can stabilize governance, ease restrictions on aid, and allow for some level of international engagement. Without systemic reforms, the country risks remaining trapped in a permanent humanitarian emergency. The Afghan people, resilient through decades of war, now face a new challenge: the fight for survival in the absence of both peace and prosperity. Recognition, diplomacy, and shifting alignments. Since 2021, the Taliban have pursued de facto ties with neighbors and big powers while lacking broad formal recognition. That changed in mid-2025 when Russia became the first country to formally recognize the Taliban government, a move framed in Moscow as pragmatic regional policy and analyzed by experts as potentially catalytic but largely symbolic, without wider follow-through from others. China, Iran, Pakistan, and several Central Asian states maintain working relations and host Taliban delegations. But most countries still withhold recognition pending changes on human rights and counterterrorism. These mixed signals leave Kabul less isolated than in 2021, yet far from normalized in the international system. ISS Carnegie Endowment, neighbors, security, refugees, and water relations with Pakistan have been especially tense. Islamabad has tied border security and Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan (TTP) violence to Kabul's policies. And since late 2023, it has periodically forced large numbers of Afghans to leave, triggering sharp criticism from rights groups and humanitarian organizations and creating new protection gaps for Afghans in Pakistan cities. Iran and Central Asian states balance border management, trade, and water resource disputes with the need for stability. All share concerns about militancy and refugee flows. These dynamics keep Afghanistan tightly bound to regional politics even as formal recognition lags. Crisis Group Amnesty International Doctors Without Borders Economics, Sanctions, and the Minerals question international sanctions, frozen reserves, and restrictions on banking continue to constrict the economy, so Kabul has looked to resource deals to bring in capital. China's role has been uneven. Analysts note slow or halting progress at Mies Ainok Copper and limited traction on other projects. A 2023 AMU Darya oil contract drew headlines but sputtered. And in August 2025, the Taliban moved to end the Chinese operator's deal, underscoring how fragile such arrangements are under current political risk. Without financial normalization and credible legal safeguards, big-ticket mining and energy investments will likely stay tentative. Stimson Center, Wilson Center, Tierline, Mill the Diplomat. Drugs, counterterrorism, and security trade-offs. The Taliban's poppy ban, announced in 2022 and enforced from 2023, has sharply reduced cultivation and opium output, according to independent assessments. While this has public health benefits, it also removes a key rural income source, driving households toward deeper poverty unless licit livelihoods emerge. At the same time, ISIS remains the most acute transnational threat actor tied to Afghanistan, conducting or inspiring attacks across the region and beyond. Western and regional services continue to disrupt plots and pursue ISIS-K facilitators. These twin dynamics reduced drug revenue for farmers and a persistent jihadist spoiler complicate both donor engagement and regional security planning. Science Direct United. States Institute of PCONO DC Director of National Intelligence Department. Of Justice Pathways Forward, what could realistically change Afghanistan's external prospects hinge on a few concrete levers. First, women's rights and broader civil freedoms remain the central obstacle to wider recognition and unfrozen finances. Absent movement here, most capitals will stick to narrow, conditions-based engagement. Second, regional compacts on refugees, counter-ISIS-K coordination, trade transit, and water could deliver incremental gains even without formal recognition. Third, economic stabilization will require banking channels for humanitarian and licit trade, transparent revenue management, and credible, enforceable mining energy contracts that share benefits locally. Finally, sustained dialogue through the UN track and ad hoc regional formats can keep channels open while setting measurable benchmarks. Education access, due process guarantees, and counter-terrorism cooperation. None of this guarantees rapid change, but stepwise progress on these points is the most plausible route from fragile de facto ties to a more durable, rules-based engagement with the world.congress.gov. Afghanistan's story is not one of endings, but of continuities. From the whispers of its ancient caves to the crowded bazaars of today, the land has endured every storm, empires, invasions, revolutions, and betrayals, yet still it breathes with life. Its mountains remain unshaken, its rivers keep flowing, and its people, though burdened, still rise each dawn with resilience. The world often looks at Afghanistan and sees only conflict, but beyond the shadows lies a nation of poets, dreamers, and survivors. The future of Afghanistan is unwritten, but one truth is certain. It will continue to stand at the crossroads of history, where every path leads back to its enduring spirit. And perhaps, in that spirit, lies the key to its rebirth.